Chapter 18. Frozen in horror, Matt stared across the low, dark dune. His breath burst out in gasps. He had the urge to turn and run, but knew he had to see what was huddled there on the sand. Walking unsteadily, trying to focus his eyes in the darkness, he made his way to the dune. When he saw her there, sitting in black tights and a long-sleeved black top, her legs pulled up, her arms encircling her knees, her head bowed, he stopped in surprise. "Jessica?" She didn't respond. "Jessica?" he repeated more loudly, taking a hesitant step toward her. He stood over her now, staring down at her mane of red hair. "Hey, Jessica?" He saw for the first time that her shoulders were trembling, and when she finally lifted her face up to him, he saw the tear-soaked cheeks, the wet eyes, her quivering chin, and realized that she'd been crying. "Sorry," Matt said, and took a step back. He felt awkward, overcome by embarrassment. "Sorry," he repeated. He didn't know what to say. She blinked several times. It seemed to take her a while to recognize him. She seemed confused, as if she were so deep in her thoughts, so deep in her sadness, that there was no room in her memory for someone from the outside world. Then she forced a wet smile, closing her eyes and raising both hands to wipe the tear tracks from her cheeks. I didn't know it was you," Matt stammered, trying to decide what to do with his hands. Finally, he just lowered them to his sides. "Are you okay?" "I guess," she replied, her voice muffled in her throat. She sighed and added, "I don't know. I can't seem to stop crying." "About Todd?" Matt asked. Of course she was crying about Todd. "I mean, I just keep thinking I'm going to run into him on the beach or in town," Jessica said, the words pouring out. "I can't believe it. I can't believe I was the last person to see him. I can't believe any of it, you know? I mean, I've never known anyone who died. Never." "Yeah," Matt said quietly, turning his eyes to the water. "It is unbelievable. He was my best friend, you know." She didn't reply. Shaking her head sadly, she pulled herself to her feet and brushed away the sand that clung to her black tights. Then she stepped closer to Matt, close enough that he could smell her perfume, tangy and pungent even in the heavy sea air. "I knew him for such a short time," Jessica said, allowing a single tear to descend down her cheek. "But I felt so close to Todd." "He was a good guy," Matt said, staring into her hypnotic eyes, feeling guilty for thinking about how good-looking Jessica was, while talking about his dead buddy. The ocean wind seemed to circle them, to draw them together. Matt felt suddenly dizzy. Was it her perfume? Was it the swirling wind? His sadness? "I don't understand why Todd tried to swim so late at night," Matt said, unable to release his eyes from her stare. "I don't either," she said softly. "He teased me about going for a swim. You know, taking off our clothes and jumping in. I knew he was just joking. At least, I thought he was joking." "Weird," Matt replied, shaking his head, trying to shake away the dizziness. "Todd wasn't much of a daredevil. He was pretty timid, you know?" "I know," she said, turning her gaze beyond Matt, her eyes surveying the nearly deserted beach. "That's why I thought he was joking about skinny dipping so late at night. When he dropped me off at my cottage, I was sure he was going to go straight home." "Weird," Matt repeated, his head spinning. "The next morning, when I heard," Jessica started, but her voice caught, and instead of words, she uttered a pained cry. Without thinking about it, Matt put an arm around her trembling shoulders to comfort her. She sobbed silently for a moment, then smiled up at him. Her perfume was so strong, so sweet, so intoxicating, it seemed to penetrate to his brain. "Did you cry too?" she asked, as they started to walk together across the sand, his arm still around her shoulders. She felt so warm and fragile, he thought. "Yeah," he admitted. "I went a little berserk, I think, when I found him. I mean, I sort of lost track of what happened. Some fisherman found me with him. I guess was a little out of my head." "I haven't stopped crying," she said softly, closing her eyes and leaning against him. "You're the first person I've been able to talk to." She rested her head on his shoulder for the briefest moment. He felt her soft hair brush his cheek, and felt a shiver of excitement run down his body. I wonder what she'd do if I kissed her, Matt thought. A wave of guilt swept over him. Here we are talking about Todd. Here she is sharing her sadness with me, confiding in me, trusting me, and all I can think about is kissing her. She smiled at him, the sadness fading from her pale face. To Matt's surprise, her smile was a knowing smile, as if she knew what he was thinking, as if she shared his thoughts. "Should I, walk you home?" he asked, his arm sliding down around her slender waist. Again her hair brushed his face as she turned to gaze into his eyes. "No, let's keep going," she suggested in a whisper, so quietly he had to lean closer to hear. She pointed toward the rocks that led up to the steep black cliff. Let's just keep going and going and going, Matt, she whispered. You're making me feel better. You really are. I'm glad, he replied. Suddenly, she pulled away from him and started jogging toward the cliff, taking long, steady strides. Startled, he immediately missed her touch, missed her warmth, missed the feel of her under his arm. Hey, wait up, he called. Without slowing, she turned back to him, a mysterious smile on her face. Jessica, wait up, he repeated, and began running over the beach, following her as the sand gave way to smooth rock, following her up toward the cliff ledge, the water crashing noisily below, crashing like his heartbeat, louder, faster, harder. Come on, stop, he called, running at full speed now, staring at her hair that flew behind her like a proud pennant. Her laughter floated back to him on the swirling wind. They were both high above the beach now, running across a smooth, flat cliff ledge. Hey, slow down, he warned, breathing hard. He saw her expression change as she neared the cliff edge, saw her mouth open wide in fear and surprise. She tried to stop, but her sneakers slid on the slippery, slick stone surface. She raised her hands as if to grab onto something, but there was nothing to grab onto. Jessica, no, Matt cried. But his words couldn't stop her either. She slid right off the edge of the cliff. He heard her terrified scream as she went over the side, saw her arms flail the air as she began to drop. Then silence. Then he was alone up there. All alone. Chapter 19. Without realizing it, Matt was at the cliff edge too, on his hands and knees, peering down into the swirling blackness, weighted down by his dread, not even breathing, holding his breath, staring into the rolling, twisting waters. She's dead too, he realized. She has fallen to her death. Frozen by his fears, by the thought of what he knew he would find, Matt stared down into the waters, crashing against a wall of rocks, and saw Jessica smiling up at him, standing near the shore, waist deep in the water, her hair catching the bright moonlight. Huh? Jessica? He managed to utter, surprised that he had any voice at all. She waved up at him, tossing her head back, then she motioned for him to come down, to join her. You're okay? He called. She couldn't hear him way down there. She motioned again for him to come down, but he couldn't stop staring at her. How had she survived that fall, he wondered, feeling his heartbeat return to normal, feeling the heavy dread lift from his body. How did she keep herself from crashing against the rocks? How did she do it? He was on his feet now, waving back at her. So happy she was alive, so happy that he felt like spreading his arms and taking off, flying off the cliff edge and floating down to her. But he turned and carefully made his way across the flat stone ledge. The rocky pathway down was steep and slippery, but he ran eagerly, stumbling, kicking stones, sending them scuttling down in small avalanches. Jessica, you're okay! She still couldn't hear him over the wind and the waves. Standing on the pebbly shore now, she smiled at him, hair aflame in the bright moonlight, arms at her sides as if patiently waiting for him. Hey, you scared me, he cried, sneakers splashing in puddled crevices in the rock-strewn sand. You really scared me. She didn't reply. She threw her arms around his shoulders and pulled his face to hers. The perfume. It seemed to float around him, to hold him, to draw him near. She felt warm and cold at the same time, wet from the ocean waters, yet her lips were so dry, hot and dry. Before Matt could take a breath, before he even realized what was happening, she was kissing his mouth, kissing his eyes, kissing his chin, kissing him with such surprising passion, so hot and so cold at the same time. The tangy perfume, the hot, dry lips, the brush of her hair, the warmth of her face, it all overwhelmed Matt. The kisses, the kisses! He struggled to respond, but he found himself sinking willingly, so willingly, into dizzying, spinning darkness. Chapter 20. Gabri rose slowly from his coffin into the blue evening. The dirt that formed his mattress, precious native soil, all that was left of his homeland, of his own true time, clung to his clothing, and he brushed it off wearily. Just waking, his face revealed the centuries. It took effort to compose himself, to soften the ravages of time, effort to make himself young again, to smooth his features, to bring the spark of life to his eyes, to lift himself through the pain, the ancient pain that swept over him every day as he slept his unnatural sleep. He groaned and smoothed back his dark hair, practiced motions, so much harder to summon the youthful face without a mirror. Yet, somehow, it was much easier to continue the evil, endless journey of a vampire without having to look at oneself, without having to see what one has become. Well, you're very philosophical today, Gabri, he said aloud. speaking to shifting shadows on a beach house wall. A quiet snicker made him spin around. A soft cry of surprise escaped his lips. Jessica. Her jumpsuit matched the blue of the night. Standing just inside the window, her billowing hair caught the pale light of the rising moon. At first she seemed to him part of the evening, a shadow stepping out of shadows, but as her eyes lit up, the rest of her appeared to take shape, to come alive. Her laugh sent a dry shiver down Gabri's back. Who invited you? He snapped. I was in the neighborhood, she choked. What do you want? He asked impatiently, his expression revealing the sourness he felt, the sourness of her unwelcome intrusion, the sourness of waking up after so many long centuries, of rising up from the dirt one more time to fly and prowl. You're not very friendly tonight, she said, approaching him slowly, a smug smile crossing her face. What's wrong, Gabri? Not succeeding as well as you planned with the little blonde? I'm succeeding better than you are, he replied coldly. Thoughts of April, of the blood, the sweet taste of blood warmed him. At least I haven't killed anyone. That's no problem, she said with a nonchalant shrug of her slender shoulders. No problem at all. You don't think I let a little thing like that stand in the way of my winning our bet, do you? He uttered an unpleasant curse. You cannot win. April is a willing victim. Ha! Jessica cried nastily, crossing her arms. What did you do? Sneak up from behind and bite her back? No need to sneak, Gabri replied. I have won her affections. She has broken off with that boyfriend of hers. What? For a brief moment, Jessica's eyes revealed surprise. She is no longer seeing Matt. She is with me now. The smile that crossed his face was triumphant and delirious. That's a victory for me, not you, Jessica said, recovering quickly. What do you mean? By splitting up April and Matt, you've made it easier for me to conquer Matt, she told him. He shook his head, brushing back his hair once again, smoothing the lines from his cheeks with both palms. Dream on, Jessica, he said dryly. You can stand here and brag about what you're going to do for the rest of eternity, but April will be an eternal one by the end of the week. I'm not the one who's bragging, she started. He pushed past her toward the shadows near the window. As she turned to face him, the shadows began to whirl, a dark dust storm. The dust cleared. Gabri emerged in bat form. I must fly to her now, he rasped, and took off through the open window, soaring until he disappeared into the darkening sky. What a cornball idiot, she muttered aloud. Reaching into his coffin, she grabbed up a handful of dirt, the precious dirt that helped maintain Gabri, and tossed it angrily to the floor. Courtney jumped on Gabri's shoulders. Whitney grabbed him around the waist. Giggling loudly, they pulled him to the deck and climbed on him. No, no, he cried helplessly, laughing and squirming, trying to unseat them, causing them to hold on even tighter. Girls, give Gabri a break, Mrs. Blair cried, shaking her head. It's okay, I can handle them, Gabri boasted. Ow! His words caused the two girls to bounce even harder on his back. Come on, girls, Mr. Blair pleaded, looking up from the newspaper. Gabri isn't a carnival ride, you know. Yes, he is, Whitney replied. He's a roller coaster, Courtney said. Whee! Ow, Gabri cried, laughing through his pretend pain, slapping the deck floorboards like a wrestler. Finally, April appeared from the house. She was wearing snug-fitting white leggings and a black t-shirt under a bright banana-yellow shirt tied in a knot at her waist. What's going on? She cried. You look very nice, her mother said approvingly, having a shout over the twins' squeals. But what are Courtney and April doing? April repeated. They've really taken to Gabri, her mother replied in a confidential whisper. That's because he lets them do whatever they want, April said, amused by the spectacle of seeing a grown teenager helpless beneath two tiny girls. Help, Gabri moaned. April came to his rescue, grabbing an arm of each sister and pulling the protesting girls off. Gabri and I have to go, she told them. But the ride isn't over, Whitney said grumpily, making a move back to Gabri, who was struggling to get to his feet. She caught him around the knees. He grabbed the deck railing to keep from falling. That's enough, Mr. Blair called firmly. I mean it, Whitney. She ignored him, of course, and continued trying to tackle Gabri, who held onto the wooden railing for dear life. It took another 10 minutes to pull the girls away and convince them to stay away. April's parents kept apologizing, but Gabri insisted he'd had a great time. Next time, I'll out-wrestle you both, he boasted to the twins. Then he said goodnight to everyone, and he and April stepped off the deck and began to follow the sandy path that led past other beach houses to town. My sisters really like you, April said. Because they can beat me up, Gabri said. My parents think you're really nice too, she added, her eyes on the path. Your parents have good taste, he replied, smiling. Oh, look, I almost forgot to show you, April said, stopping suddenly. What is it? My dad got me an early birthday present, she replied, her hand searching under the black t-shirt. My birthday isn't until next month, but Dad can never wait. The yellow shirt she had on top seems to shimmer in the moonlight. Gabby stared, following her hand as it found the chain she was wearing around her neck. Look, April said, and raised a small, shiny pendant for him to see. It's a silver cross, isn't it elegant? The cross caught the moonlight and glowed, the light catching the horror on Gabby's face. Gabby took a step back and tried to soften his expression before April noticed. His thoughts churned. The light of the cross had burned him as if it were a searing flame. Very beautiful, he managed to say. What am I to do, he thought, suddenly in a panic. I dare not come close. I dare not puncture her throat. I cannot taste the blood while she wears that cross. What to do? What to do? Its simple power could blind him forever. Its light could burn his already dry flesh. It could consume him in flames. What to do? What to do? Then, as April replaced the cross, trying to tuck it back under the shirt, it slipped out of her hand. Oh? Gabby saw it hit the sand. April bent down quickly, her hand searching the ground. She pulled it back up, a frown on her face. The clasp is a little loose, she said, squeezing the cross in her hand. She turned to him. Would you help me put it back on? Okay. He stepped behind her so she wouldn't see his hands trembling. With the cross at her throat, she raised the ends of the chain behind her neck. Just clasp it for me? No problem, he said softly, being careful not to let his eyes rest on the cross. He took the ends of the delicate chain and pressed them together. He pretended to have difficulty, then pretended to succeed in closing the clasp. It should hold, he told her, but he had deliberately left the chain unclasped. Thank you, she said, turning to flash him a grateful smile. He smiled back, careful not to glance at the cross, gleaming just below her throat. It's very pretty, he said, a cold tremor coursing down his back from the thought of it. They made their way toward town, walking slowly past rows of beach cottages, all of their windows glowing with orange and yellow light. As the houses gave way to a field of tall grass, Gabby saw the unclasped cross slip off and silently fall to the ground. They kept walking. April hadn't noticed. Gabby smiled at her, unable to conceal his joy and relief. Happily, so happily, eager for what was about to happen, he put his arm around her shoulders and drew her close. Later that same night, Matt arrived home from his date with Jessica. He stopped at the back door, closed his burning eyes, and pressed his feverish forehead against the cool glass. I'm so tired, he thought. So tired, it seemed an impossible effort to pull open the door and get into his bed. It couldn't be that late, Matt thought, opening his eyes and pushing himself with great effort away from the doorway. The moon was still high in the sky. The air was cold and heavy with dew. He coughed. His throat ached. Hope I'm not getting sick. To his surprise, his night with Jessica was already fogged in his memory. Where had they gone? What had they done? He remembered the dark beach. He remembered her mouth, her lips, her kisses. He remembered the pain, the sweet pain. Pain? No, couldn't be pain. I'm just too tired to remember, he told himself. I'm just so tired. Somehow he pulled open the door. Silently he moved across the squeaking floorboards, through the dark kitchen, through the short, narrow hallway past his parents' room. Silence. To his room. So tired, so weary. It took such effort to push open the door. He felt so heavy. His clothes felt so heavy. His hair felt heavy on his head. He was breathing hard from the exertion of walking. He had to get undressed, out of the heavy clothes that were weighing him down. He had to get to bed, to sleep, had to sleep away this weariness, sleep away the aching of his throat. But where was he? Why was everything tilting and swaying? Just tired. Just so tired. Jessica, he thought, picturing her pale, dramatic face, picturing the flowing red hair, the burning eyes. Jessica, why am I so tired? What did we do, Jessica? What did we do? He forced himself not to think about her. If he started to think about Jessica, he'd never get to sleep. First, I have to get undressed, he decided, struggling to clear his mind. The familiar furniture of his room was a blur of shadows. A blur among blurs. But suddenly, one of the blurs came into solid focus. Matt blinked, once, twice. Someone was sitting on his bed, sitting in the dark room, his back to Matt. He blinked again, willing the image away. But it wouldn't leave. It was really there. Someone was on his bed. Gripped with fear, Matt stared at the unmoving form. Who was it? Who was in his room at this hour? How did he get in? "Hey," Matt uttered in a whisper. "Hey!" Holding his breath, summoning his courage, struggling to clear his head, he reached out and tapped the person on the shoulder. As Matt touched him, the dark figure slowly turned. His face came into view, and Matt began to scream. Chapter 21. Pressing both hands over his mouth to muffle his shrieks, Matt backed away from the bed. He bumped into his dresser, sending a stab of pain down his back. Ignoring it, he gaped in horror at the somber-faced figure hunched on his bed, staring back at him across the room. Slowly, gulping for air, Matt lowered his hands. "Todd!" he cried, his voice escaping his throat in a hoarse whisper. "Todd, you're dead!" The figure, hands resting on the knees of his black slacks, leaned forward slowly, and his face edged out of the shadows into the square of pale moonlight from the window. "Todd!" Matt repeated, his back pressed hard against the dresser. Todd's face appeared in the light, green and swollen. His eyes were open but had sunk back in his head. Encircled by pus, the pupils were solid white. A tear in the flesh of one cheek allowed the skin to sag like a pocket. When Todd finally opened his mouth to speak, his jaws grating as they opened like a squeaking rusty door, Matt saw that several teeth were missing. "Hi, Matt." The voice was like wind, a rushing of air. "No!" A wave of fear nearly brought Matt to his knees. He turned and gripped the dresser top to keep himself upright. "No!" "Yes," the creature on the bed hissed. The curtains on the window appeared to billow up in response. "Yes," Todd repeated, as if testing his own breathless voice. And again the curtains flapped in reply. This isn't a dream, Matt realized, feeling the knob on the dresser drawer press into his back. How many times had he dreamed about Todd since that terrible morning when he had discovered him bobbing in the water, cut and lifeless? How many times had Todd returned to invade Matt's dreams? But this was no dream. Todd, dead Todd, sat on Matt's bed, his sunken egg-white eyes staring up at Matt, his sagging ripped face testifying to his death. "Todd, you're dead," Matt repeated. The thought formed a barrier to any other words. He couldn't get past it. "You're dead." "I'm not dead at night," Todd whispered, leaning closer to make himself heard. The curtains blew out the window as if being sucked out by some invisible force. "I'm not dead at night," Todd repeated breathlessly. "At night, I'm caught between life and death." Todd's head angled to one side, dropping nearly to his shoulder, as if holding it up were a strain. "No!" Matt cried, closing his eyes, unable to continue staring at this hideous, distorted form of his old friend. When he opened his eyes, he gasped in horror. Todd had risen up off the bed. "No, please," Matt cried, trying to back away, but he was trapped against the dresser. Todd moved forward quickly, seeming to float across the room. He reached out and grabbed Matt by the shoulders. His grip was hard as bone. The blank white eyes, so deep in their red, pus-filled sockets, stared into Matt's eyes as if accusing him. "Todd, no!" But Todd's grip tightened. An odor of decay filled Matt's nostrils. He tried to hold his breath, but his chest was heaving. The foul odor encircled him, closed in on him, until he uttered a strangled cry. He almost suffocated under the power of the fetid smell. Still, Todd gripped his shoulders, his white eyes staring blindly into Matt's, hovering over Matt, floating above him in the dark room, imprisoning Matt, cornering him, paralyzing him with the odor of decay, the smell of death. "Todd, what are you doing?" Matt managed to cry out, in a terrified voice he didn't recognize. "What are you doing?" Chapter 22. I came to warn you," Todd whispered, the words escaping hesitantly in small bursts of foul breath. "Huh?" Matt closed his eyes, tried to keep down the waves of nausea. Todd loosened his grip but didn't back away. "I came to warn you," he repeated, tilting his head till it rested on his shoulder. Matt opened his eyes to see a foot-long tear in the flesh of Todd's neck. "Vampires," Todd whispered. "Yes," Matt agreed, nodding solemnly. Everything was spinning so fast, he had to close his eyes again. If only he could escape from the smell, so putrid, so sour, so sickening, so suffocating. "They're vampires, Matt," Todd warned, reaching out to Matt as he floated backward. "I know," Matt whispered, his eyes closed. "I know, Todd." "Listen," Todd hissed, suddenly sounding far away. "Listen, Matt. I came to warn you. They're vampires." "I know, Todd. I know," Matt cried, with a loud sob. His eyes were shut tight. He tried not to inhale. The smell was so powerful, so disgusting. I know, Todd, he repeated weakly, but I'm so tired. Silence. Matt kept his eyes shut. I'm so tired, Todd. Really, I'm just so tired. Silence. I'm sorry, Todd. I'm really sorry, but I'm very tired now. I'm just too tired. Matt swam slowly to consciousness and, one eye open, peered out the window. A wash of gray morning light filled the room. He groaned and tried to open his other eye, then gave up and closed them both. He didn't remember falling asleep. He didn't remember sleeping. He only remembered the dream. Am I ever going to stop dreaming about Todd? He wondered, yawning, stretching his legs over the bed covers. Hey! He pulled himself up and, squinting, looked down. He was still dressed, still wearing the denim cutoffs and blue long-sleeve polo shirt he had worn with Jessica. Oh, he groaned, seeing that his sneakers, caked with wet sand, were still on his feet. The bedspread was streaked with sand. He must have just fallen onto his bed unconscious. Reaching for his alarm clock, he knocked his Walkman onto the floor. It hit with a loud clunk and bounced. It was only 7:15, still early. What was that smell in his nostrils? That sour smell. It was in his throat, too. It seemed to be on his skin. Had he thrown up without realizing it? Still squinting and struggling to wake up, Matt pulled himself to his feet and looked about unsteadily. Bits of the dream flashed into his mind. It had been a terrifying dream, so real the foul aroma had stayed with him. He stumbled to the mirror over the dresser and grabbed the dresser top for support. Even though he had slept for hours, he didn't feel at all rested or refreshed. In fact, he had never felt this tired in all his life. Must be sick, he thought, the foul odor clinging to his nostrils. He bumped the Kleenex box onto the floor. Not bothering to pick it up, he peered into the mirror, and saw the dark pinprick bruises on his throat, and knew it wasn't a dream. Todd was here, he said aloud, his voice hoarse and sleep-clogged. Todd came back to warn me. He leaned forward, pressing himself against the wooden dresser to get a better look. Tiny round pinpricks, the color of red plums. A tiny bruise, where Jessica had drunk. Jessica. She was a vampire. Todd had come to warn him about Jessica. She had given him the same kind of throat wound as April had. Staring into the mirror, Matt knew he had been right. Gabby was a vampire, too. Todd had come to warn him. He raised 2 fingers to his throat and gently, reluctantly touched the bruise. Touching the spot gave him a chill of pleasure. Those kisses, those lips, so wet against his throat, so warm. He pressed the spot lightly and received another chill. It wasn't a dream. Todd was here. And now what can I do? What should I do? He realized his legs were trembling. He felt so weak, so completely exhausted. Dizzily, he made his way back to bed. He sat down heavily and tried to pull off his sneakers, but the effort was too much for him. I've got to do something. Got to warn April. Sighing, he toppled onto his back, his arms dropping weakly over the sides of the bed. Got to warn April, he whispered, struggling to open his eyes. Got to save us. Then he was asleep again. Not a normal sleep, but a deep unconsciousness, a dreamless darkness. He was awakened some time later by hands shaking him roughly. Todd, he cried, sitting up straight. Todd, you're back?